So invite us just to take a moment and just wiggle in the seat and sort of find a fresh spot, come to rest, and gently let the eyes soften. And as we say, go inside. It begins with a direction, yet it really is a dimension that we're entering. That's what tonight's lecture is really all about. Entering this dimension of inner space that's already here without our having to do anything. And as the eyes soften, just let the breath do whatever the breath wants to do. Take a moment and just visualize everything from the day falling away. All the ins and outs and upside downs and roundabouts, let them all fall away. And as the breath is breathing you, breathing me, invite us to visualize this great truth that there's something here holding us. Holding each one of us and holding us all together. Visualize this energy holding us, holding you, holding me. Really wanting our surrender, our acquiescence to being held with kindness, patience, understanding, wisdom, strength, love. In the lecture tonight, the guide tells us, your path is blessed every step of the way. Just feel this blessing now settling down around you. Around your shoulders, at your back, above you and below. Visualize yourself at the very center of this blessing. Hear the blessing saying, I'm here with you. I got you. Whatever the human doubt might be, connect for a moment with a place in the heart that says yes. Yes, I want to feel you. Help me know you're here. Take a moment now and extend the awareness to all those that are here with you, wherever they might be on the planet, in this moment, in this form, right here, right now, close by. people you know, people you don't know yet. And finally, take a moment and ask for a blessing to really let this time be what it can be today. Be willing to allow a small miracle. Right here, right now, together. Taking your time, all the sweet time, and just letting the eyes open and drink in the people on the screen here. On the screen, yet very much in the circle, together. So my name is Brian, for those of you that I haven't met before. It's always nice to see some new faces, and of course they're faces I know from way back. And we're going to begin with our go round just to say your name and where you are on the planet so we can visualize the light going off on the globe, right? And just a few words about what you're noticing in you right now. And anybody can begin.
Hi, I'm Karen. I'm in Shenandoah, Virginia, and feeling quite content, relaxed, and joyful tonight. And I'm happy to be here with everyone. Thank you.
Welcome, Karen. Glad you're here.
My name's Dan. I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm just looking forward to spend a little time with some folks and sharing. So, yeah.
Good to have you, Dan.
My name is Deborah. I'm out in California, and it's my first time tuning into one of these. I was just interested in the topic and want to learn.
Welcome. Glad you're here.
I'm Kim. I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia. I've been having a hard time lately, and part of me didn't want to come tonight because of that, but I thought it would be good to come anyway. So here I am.
Glad you're here, just as you are, Kim.
I'm Esther Mulroy from Swampscott, Massachusetts, and I was excited to hear the possibility of a small miracle with our little group.
Good to have you, Esther.
I'm Frank.
Sorry, Frank, go ahead.
Okay. Richmond, Virginia. And I'm feeling pretty mellow tonight. And glad to be here.
Glad to have you as always, Frank.
I'm Jim Walker. I'm from Red Lake, Ontario, Canada. And yeah, just looking forward to the meeting tonight and feeling good.
Mhm. Welcome, Jim. So I think everybody's gone. So my name is Brian, and I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And I'm very glad to be here. And the small miracle I'm expecting is to be able to be in this seat and provide some value, because I actually feel pretty terrible. I was coming down with a bug today, and so it's kind of humbling just to show up and say, I'm not at my best. And yet, I'm trusting, like, there's more room for you to step in and step up, and I'm really going to invite everybody that's here, especially since we're a small group, just to speak freely, take your time, and co-create and collaborate here with me. So, the lecture tonight is not one that I actually had read before. And I know you're shocked that a pathwork helper, there's lectures that they haven't read before, right? And let me say, to be honest, that, I'm one of those people who has a really hard time reading a pathwork lecture. And truth be told, over the course of my 30 years as a path worker and 20 as a helper, I would say at least a half of the people that I know, have worked with, have a really hard time reading a lecture. And yet, there's some of us that just wade right in, like, wow, read it from start to finish. So, I've been curious about this in recent years. Like, well, what was it like when people were actually attending the lecture as Eva was giving it, right? And so, yeah, I've been asking everybody I can find who was at a lecture, and most of them told me I couldn't remember anything she said. Wow, what a relief, right? Yet, what they all spoke about was the energy that they felt. Right? Just very palpable. They felt themselves in a field that was expanded, including their own expansion. And many of them told me I had no idea what she was talking about until I actually got a copy of the lecture later, and then was reading and going, oh yeah, I remember her saying that, and so forth and so on. So this is actually very apropos of lecture 256, Inner Space Focused Emptiness, because really what the guide is inviting us to do is realize that there is a deeper intelligence in us that we can trust, that isn't relayed through the mind, right? Like, of course, it's useful to use the mind to, understand what the words mean and what they're describing and so forth and so on. Yet, the way we've been raised, especially over, the last 1,000 years or so as human beings, is to be turned into worker bees, ants, basically, in an anthill, right? To learn how to be useful, to be functional. That's our primary purpose. And so, we've been taught to value the kind of intelligence that comes from the mind, that can learn things and do things and remember things. And from this place, the mind has created a version of reality that is out there that we're wandering around in, that the guide is telling us in this lecture actually is not reality. It's just a reflection of an inner reality inside each one of us. Yeah. Now, when I read that, when I hear that, part of me goes, oh yeah, I understand that. And yet I realize that I'm just sort of giving it lip service, you know, and I'm curious if anybody here is noticing in themselves any struggle around this inner reality versus outer reality, right? Like it's easy to sort of understand it on a mental level, yet, you know, remember, it's the mind that's hearing these words in this sentence. And the mind is the first thing it wants to say is yes, but. What we run into very quickly is that this part of our human package, the mind, is very jealous and possessive of what it can control, and really struggles mightily to keep away what it can't control. And really what the mind primarily can't control is the fundamental nature of our being, is we're spiritual beings in a human body, in human form, and actually a temporary human disguise. Right? So let me just pause here for a moment and just invite, you know, some inspiraling. And remember, you get to say anything you want without thinking about it here. This is what it means to be collaborative and co-creative, that you say something you might not have thought you were going to say, yet you're also speaking a voice in the room. We're trusting all these voices in the room. Let's just take a moment and say what voices are here, just with where we are so far.
Yeah, Brian, I struggle with the terminology that like the guide uses God and Christ a lot in this lecture. And I noticed you're going to the end of the lecture series, the guide uses that terminology more and more. And you know, and I know the guide explains that, you know, it's not God, the Father figure, or you know, and it's also the Christ consciousness. But I still struggle with that terminology because of, well, just, you know, the religious upbringings and things that comes that way. But it also, you know, in the other way, it also helps with, you know, like what you said about the mind and how it struggles with understanding, you know, the inner spiritual side, you know. So in a way, it helped that way too. It's kind of a mixed thing for me in this lecture.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah. Who else? Empty your pockets here. Like, you know, this is not something you have to swallow just to be a good path worker. It's a good place to express any resistance, because the resistance is going to follow you back into life after you leave here, right?
Mhm.
So this is a good place to express it. It's welcome.
So 256, I don't think I've read it either. And I didn't read it prior to this. And it also doesn't surprise me to hear Jim say there was mention enough of Christ and Christian that it's always, well, for a long time that's been difficult for me because I was raised a Catholic, and it's taken me quite a while to, I guess, to get to, I wouldn't call it resolution, but kind of a working method for when my mind wants to go, Jesus Christ. And I just, for me, as I've spent so much time in my work, on my path, struggling with my ego or what goes on in my mind my thoughts and all the millions of things I don't like about it, that I hate about it. Over time, I've had the sense of there's just more than a critical aspect of me hating another part of me. There's oddly a presence within that's just more than just mind. It's a felt. And I've often asked myself, well, maybe this warm presence or this kind of closeness presence within you, maybe that's what other people call Jesus, or that inner relationship with Jesus, or being saved, or all that other, the way they describe it. And I think perhaps I'm more inclined to believe so than not, which is not a bad thing, to have a sense of your own presence. My only difficulty is why call it Jesus when it's really probably more you than, and that's where I think where it gets confusing for me. So I just wanted to throw that out.
That voice is welcome and needed here, Dan. Thank you.
I've been talking with friends in a different framework about don't believe everything you think. And that's kind of what this brings up for me, that we have everything we see and experience, we're just have such a framework of our expectations and our beliefs. And so, I mean, I'm not really seeing the reality or what's really happening. And I'm certainly not seeing you as you actually are. And so some of this inner space idea of emptiness would be for me to try to set aside, as much as it's humanly possible, to break free of all of those expectations and what I believe to be true or to be important, and my ego trying to confirm my reality and how important I am. So I find that very exciting. I know we can't do it to a real large part. And of course, we can't, I mean, we don't want to do it when we're driving the car or, cutting up the vegetables or whatever. But it is a real, for me, I'd like to pursue that of separating myself from, even if I can just do it for a few seconds at a time, I mean, even if it's looking at the bird and hearing the bird and not labeling and not trying to identify and not going off into this story about, oh, I should have some other bird food that, you know what I mean, like a whole story about everything. So that interests me.
Thank you, Deborah.
So like one of the issues that I've been dealing with my helper is that I always create a story of people are trying to hurt me or take my power away. And then recently, a week ago Thursday, I was completely hacked on my computer. And then people were seeing my caller ID as somebody else's name and not mine. So I really had to think, you know, like about my identity in what's important about how I created this outside from so much of a life like of that, of like worried about my identity or not liking myself is probably primarily it, and then never speaking up and not saying no. So as far as so I was never inner. So now I'm inner, and so it's not always comfortable to be inner. And then when I was reading this lecture, it was sort of talking about how the outer and inner kind of interrelate. So I just am bringing up that because I can see how. But as far as making up the story, you know, it's like I have to just stop with the story, like what Deborah was saying. You just stop with your old story and then take it, you know, and I had been doing that, so maybe that's why this big thing showed up. So, you know, it tests you even further, you know, how the outside might test your inner side further. To say, really, have you done this? Because it was saying that too in the lecture. Like, if you are deliberately avoid growing into full selfhood, if you rebel against authority figures, you know, those are all like clues that you still are, you know, haven't really achieved something to be whole. So the other thing I found, I got kind of stuck in the lecture because it said when you pass away, that we go in, or we don't go up into any heaven. It's like you go in. So I was like kind of struck by that. I had not thought of that ever. And that it was a mirror image is what I thought, that we go to heaven. But we really just go inside to ourselves. So thanks.
Thank you, Esther. Anyone else want to share what happens when you dip your foot into this lecture for yourself, just as it is, right?
Well, I didn't read the lecture. Actually had another plan for tonight that fell through, so I thought I'd jump on the call. But I think, to speak personally, I feel like I need to have my inner compass pointing in a direction, you know, that makes sense. I can't keep bouncing off of one possibility or another ideologically. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so when you say that we are spiritual beings temporarily journeying in a human body, yeah, that like brings super true in on my internal compass, and I feel like I can point my actions and my intentions in life in that direction,
Mhm.
and yeah, when I first came to Pathwork, I didn't want Pathwork to be anything about Jesus or God. I wanted something completely new because I was raised Catholic and I was sick and tired of all that Christian doctrine. But what I came to discover was Pathwork appears to be, to me, actually a new model of Christianity, where the emphasis is on Christ consciousness, not on Jesus, the person, and it's kind of, I don't know if it's intended by the guide and the emissaries that he's working with, but it's kind of like, okay, we've got Christianity, now let's make it something we can really work with, because it's more the way it is, it's more myth than anything else. And it needs to be something that's like practical and applicable, not just a kind of not just something that, people hold as a shield. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like, for me, it was like, yeah, okay, a new model of Christianity that maybe the world who is attached to the religion of Christianity can kind of absorb.
So, Frank, let me say what my own personal history is. I'm a recovering Catholic, so I have a lot of religious wounding, and the whole God thing is difficult for me. Yet, there's also an experience that you're hinting at here, that whatever word you want to use, God or Jesus or Christ consciousness, or is actually some aspect of our own being, right? Our own inner divinity that's here. And, part of what we're wanting to do here is help us each get a taste of what that really is. And where it is in this direction that this lecture is, the guide is inviting us to be with ourself, inside of ourself, in a place that is completely beyond all our previous experience of growing up, education, employment, creativity, love, estrangement, all those things.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't read the lecture, but does it give you an experiential kind of thing you can use to get there? Because most of the time you're just walking around being triggered.
Put on your seatbelt.
So I'm ready.
All right. Anyone else want to speak up before we go on?
Go ahead and share. What comes to me is, I guess, my mother was a recovering Catholic. My mom taught me, she brought me to all different churches, all different places, not just one religion. And I had an experience of feeling love in all of them. And I did go within about it and thought, it's interesting, all these religions, but there seems to be a central truth beyond the words and what man's personality has used it for, whether it be control or whatever the reason, that the source, the seed of the truth is in all. So I took it to more of a symbolic, like Jesus or Christ, or rather than a human. I mean, it could have been using him as a human example of something deeper within all of us, whether it be Jesus or some other religious figure. And then, there's a thing of practicality of learning. And I've been learning with path work and going very deep. I also had a very unfortunate situation of being left very alone with myself, where I chose to, rather than be negative and die, I chose to really go within and start searching some truth. And just some of my experiences are revealing more truth. Rather, so I haven't gotten too stuck in other people's wordings, whether it be experiences or my own, for that matter, story. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Karen. Deborah, I saw you smiling. You're muted.
Oh, it was a random thought. Thanks for letting me share. Just, I go to recovery meetings and it's the standard closing, and I just had to tell myself where I am and where I'm not. That's all.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly why we want to have that spontaneity here. Okay, so I want to unwrap the gift that's here for all of us, each in our own way. And remember, most of what we've been saying here is coming from our cognitive intelligence that's using words and sentences and ideas and trying to integrate our personal experience. And that's a very useful thing for so many things. Yet it actually becomes an impediment to stepping in to this deeper experience of life that the guide is offering here. So what'll help is to just realize while we're here that there's actually two parts of us. There's the part of us that's just getting up and doing it again every day, right? And really, for that part of us, there's a lot of struggle in life. And it's interesting about human nature, even if we don't have a lot of adversity, we create struggle, right? Like, we know this is one of the things that we learn in the path work, is that it's harder for us to feel pleasure and bliss than it is to feel distress and suffering and pain. Like, there's something about that, whether we think we deserve it or not, it's just where we gravitate left on our own, right? It's where our human autopilot takes us. So there's also another part of us that's just as real. In fact, I could say even more real, that creates a duality. Let me just say just as real as this human part, and that's this spiritual being that's in this temporary human form and is really dedicated to the task of caring for, tending to, safeguarding this human being that, you know, it came into incarnation to become, right? So most of us are somewhat familiar with the human part of us that longs to connect more with something greater than us, right? Whether you call it your spiritual self or your soul or your created self, whatever you want to call it. What we forget, though, is that this spiritual being in this human form actually has a great desire to connect with the human being. And when we're not feeling it, as the human part of us is not feeling that connection and devotion and love and care and cultivation, the blessing every step of the way, the phrase in the lecture that God uses, it's really because we're blocking it. That it is possible before this life is over to live more and more in this state that God is describing in the lecture of spontaneity, abundance, creativity, bliss, connection, abundance, right? Yet it means hearing the guide's invitation to look at where we're blocking it, right? That the assumption is, you know, our natural state is not the human being who's struggling and trying to figure out, you know, what's going on with my life. That's actually a smaller part of who we are. Yet, you know, we've allowed it to become more and more of who we think we are. So, you know, I'm stumbling with my words here, yet in many of the lectures, the guide says this: look, I'm trying to describe things that words can't really fully describe. So don't get hung up on the words. Listen with your inner knowing, right? So, you know, I've been doing this work for 30 years. I really want to know what is it really about, other than just all these beautiful rules about how to be or how not to be, right? Like, I really want to taste the pleasure supreme, the bliss, right? The sense of purpose that my life is being fulfilled. So I want to know what the blocks are. Show me the blocks, right? Well, we all have lots of blocks. And our list of blocks is very personal to who we are and our incarnatory journey, what we brought into this incarnation to transform, so forth and so on. Yet, in this lecture, the guide is really pointing out one of the major blocks for us to uncover, to really lift out of vagueness, is as human beings, we have this natural fear of going inside. We know it's a good thing for us. We know we should do it. We even try to do it, yet we're not doing it wholeheartedly because we're afraid. What are we afraid of? Well, we know the mind is terrified of losing control, right? The mind will do anything to try to maintain control. And so, the mind tries to scare us, to get us to consider maybe you don't really want to look inside. Psst, there's nothing there. You don't have anything in there. Right? And the mind knows how to appeal to our fundamental state of unworthiness that every human being has. That's for other people. It's not for you. So I see a lot of smiles here, and a smile is a form of recognition, right? So you see you're really onto something. The smile is onto something here. Right? So it doesn't matter how many years you try to should yourself into going inside, into inner space, and participating in, this state of focused awareness, until you really uncover the part of you that says no. Right? And primarily what I've uncovered in myself, and really anybody I've been blessed to work with, is this fundamental state of unworthiness or insufficiency, right? Like, I don't really have the whole universe inside of myself. I know the guide says that in a number of different lectures, but I'm just an average person who's kind of stumbling along, doing the best they can, right? You see how we're attached to this limited vision of who we really are. And guess what? We're not going to talk ourselves out of it, because to talk to ourselves, we have to use the mind. And remember, the mind is the one dealing all the cards here. So I'm going to invite us to have just a brief experience of this together. You can take a moment and do whatever you need to do just to settle in your chair again for a moment and let the eyes go inside. Let your awareness follow it. And just let all the thoughts go, just like that. Let all the words fall like leaves at your feet. And feel your longing for a moment. Longing. Feel it in the heart, like an energy. It's right at the center of your being. It's a tidal force. The guide tells us your longing is the part of you that knows already. And feel the different rays in your longing, different divine rays. Feel your longing for wholeness, to be whole. To have all the different fragmented pieces of you brought together. Feel your longing to know who you really are. Feel your longing to let go all the stories you've been told about yourself. all the stories you tell yourself. Feel your longing to be at peace. Feel your longing to be deeply connected. Feel your longing to not have to wait anymore. And really let your longing just move through you right now. Moving through your heart. Just letting the mind go. Whatever your longing presents in your own heart, just let it. Let it draw you. There's a natural tendency to feel the longing for something out there that we don't have. And we ask to create a blessing here together right now to let that longing go deeper down inside of us, turn around and go down inside of us. And to consider it's already here. You feel the longing to connect with that. Even just a glimmer. Even just a moment of, ah, wow. Visualize a candle here in your heart. Visualize yourself lighting this candle, really wanting to light this candle. Take a moment and just gaze at this candle of your longing burning inside you. And as we come back to the circle together, let part of you stay there with that longing. And remember that beautiful phrase from the guide that your longing can only be for something you can have. You can't long for something you can't have. Right? That there's a wisdom in the longing that knows this is within my reach. This is mine. Right? And remember, there's a lifetime of doubt and skepticism here as well, right? So, after reading this lecture over and over and over and just really praying to know what's it really about, right, under all those words, and not wanting to come here and just repeat a bunch of beautiful phrases from the lecture, I really bring my own experience of what's really at hand here. I'm going to invite you to consider that just the longing for this state the guide is offering here, inner space, focused emptiness, is the most important thing you can bring, right? It's a receptivity. And the longing is already willing to put the mind down, right? The longing knows very well what the mind can't do on its own, right? Yeah, we have a natural fear of our longing because it's so powerful. We know we can't control it. And we're afraid of being disappointed. Right? So I shy away from it. We have all heard, don't ask for too much, you won't be disappointed, right? So if you can just let yourself have that longing right now, I want to taste what this offer really is here. That beautiful state where all my senses are alive. Where I'm not just thinking things, I'm hearing them, smelling them, feeling them, tasting them, right? Really being alive. So consider that this longing really is a form of grace, right? And once we realize that that longing is something that we can trust, it gives us the courage to turn inside and face the emptiness that's in there, right? And realize the emptiness is not an indication that we're missing something or there's something wrong with us. It's like a creative emptiness, right? We can feel the presence of grace that can hold us while we're feeling all those things we don't want to feel that are coming back to haunt us with our vicious circles, our fixed patterns, right? Our pseudo solutions, our limited ways of dealing with life, right? So the way I experience what the guide is offering here is that we're not just coming to another room in our house in the inner space, right? We're coming to the wellspring of our divine nature, of grace, of wisdom, of love, of patience, of kindness, of understanding, right? That knows how to hold with care and tenderness whatever the struggle is that the human being is going through. Right? The struggle of the day, which is also the struggle of the lifetime, right? Of this lifetime. So I'm going to pause here and just make some room for any glimmers that you're having, any fears, any doubts, any resistance.
Are you asking us to share or just to think?
Say that again, Deborah.
Are you asking us to share or
Yes,
to
please.
just?
Yeah.
Well, what
You're
I'm
feeling, especially
yeah.
what you're feeling, right?
Well, what I'm feeling, and I mean it's so easy to feel that longing and then restrict myself by labeling it like, oh, I want a partner. I want to be in love. I want a bigger house. I want my kids to be happy. You know,
Yeah.
it's like to be afraid of the expansiveness and use my human mind to restrict it into something more
Something to acquire.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a better job or something out there.
Yeah.
And if I had that, then that would fulfill this longing. And I mean, I think all of us here are a little more advanced than that. I mean, we're more in touch with the spiritual, but at least speaking for myself, it's still really a big temptation to restrict the
Yes,
longing,
right.
narrow it down.
And consider, Deborah, that really what we're witnessing here in our human nature, this is not just you, this is all of us, is the mind is saying, I'm scared of your longing. I'd rather you just want a bigger house. Right. And we all have a list of things that we really want, right? And yet the longing is for something at a deeper level than whatever the wanting is, right? We could say really their deepest longing is to be free, completely free of our own interpretation of what life struggles say about our worthiness, right? Free to know who we really are. these spiritual beings in a temporary human disguise. Right? They came
Yeah, I
here
find,
to transform some piece of consciousness that was on the spiritual level wanting to be transformed. We brought it here, right? Jim.
yeah, well, yeah, it's, when I'm in meditation and silence and, feeling the feelings, and then coming back to the, it's almost like reality or the real world, not reality, I guess, but the real world where the daily grind and,
Mhm.
having to try to grasp that feeling during the trials and the struggles and just the daily grind. That's the struggle for me, for sure.
Right, the
The
grand and the grind.
frustrations,
Mhm.
the frustrations and, you know, like reading the lectures and knowing that, that the frustrations and taking those and finding the lesson and all that is intellectually it's there, but to feel the feelings and
Mhm.
to feel that is I guess is part of the goal, I guess,
Mhm.
for me,
Yeah.
which isn't easy. But,
Mhm.
bringing that feeling into everyday life.
Yeah. So yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying, Jim. You're speaking for all of us here, because that's the daily engagement, right? The grand and the grind. They're hand in hand here.
Yeah, the daily review, all the stuff that, you go through the lectures and, the exercises and the prayers and, the meditation, it's all part of, you have to go through that,
Mhm.
you have to pay that to get to that bliss, I guess.
Mhm. I noticed the word have to, and I feel some caution around
Hesitation.
that, right? Now it becomes, there's so many layers of how we should on ourselves, right? Like
Right.
trying to follow the rules, trying to be a good person, right? And the intention is good, yet what happens is we start to look at the struggles that we're going through as something we have to get through before we can be more of who we want to be, right?
Right. Instead of looking back at them as lessons.
Yeah, the
And
stepping stones, the very raw material.
using
What
that
I'm struggling
material.
with today that I wish I could get rid of is the very thing that's just begging me to turn to it and say, help me understand you. Right? So, the pathwork is very good at getting us to work on our issues, right?
Right.
Work on our images and so forth and so on. And there's real value in that, of course. Yet here, consider the guide is offering in this inner space, focused emptiness, is that there is a place inside of each of us that has this inner space. This is just part of our humanity package that most of us just dimly aware of, and be willing to get to know it. Being willing to cultivate the experience, and that's
Not
why
judge it.
that longing is so valuable. because it's coming from a deeper part of us that already knows that this is inside, right? And if we could just enter that space, even for a few moments at a time, what happens is answers are revealed to us. We see things that we can't see just from our cognitive function, right? And even if we're only in this inner space, focused emptiness for a few moments, we can go back to the more mental cognitive state with some new spaciousness inside of us, right? So for example, somebody I care about is really upset with me. They really feel misunderstood by me. This is somebody that matters to me. They're hurt. They're angry. So from my cognitive place, which includes my codependency, I want to do anything I can to make it better. Right? Also feeling some shame and some guilt, like, how could I have been so ignorant or so callous, right? Well, some of all of this is useful and good for me to consider. Yet you say how I'm operating more, on the surface level of right or wrong, what I did right, what I did wrong, what they're doing wrong. They're not seeing me. They're not understanding I'm really their friend, so forth and so on, right? Yet really what's going on, as path workers, we learn is like, I'm going through something and they're going through something. It only has appeared between us because we're each already going through something inside of us, right? But just a few moments of inner space, focused emptiness makes room for that understanding. Like, wow, I'm afraid I'm unlovable. And this issue with this other person, I'm feeling those feelings. I can't do it right. I'll never get it right. I'm unlovable again, right? Yet in the few moments in the inner space focused emptiness, when I'm getting in touch with, I love this person. I'm learning to love myself. I know deep down there's a both and here, right? That this is just a temporary occurrence, this distress, this storm between the two of us. Right? Rather than trying to fix it, I want to connect in my inner space, focused emptiness with my heart, feel my heart, my longing for love, right? Wow, when I come back face to face with this person, there's a larger force at work than just my trying to make it right, right? There's grace is flowing because I was able to go inside and connect with it, right? And you notice there wasn't any of that, what should I do now? What's the right thing to do? How should I deal with that, right? Again, that's coming from the mind, and some of that is helpful. Yet what I'm hoping to do just by this example is give you a taste of this vast storehouse of the spiritual side of us, right? That is right there waiting for us to put ourselves into the flow of it, be washed with it, and then come back to the outer situation again. As it turns out, what we often actually can do in many of these outer situations, whether it's in relationship or at work or, is actually pretty limited. What's happened is we've gone into our fear, into our guilt, into our shame, and, we're not operating from the real self that knows there's no separation between me and this outer situation, right? Like that there's just something here waiting for me to learn and to understand. The other thing I want to say is often what I see from this place of inner space focused emptiness is that there's just so many things I can't control and I don't control, even if I want to. Even if I want to make them better, I can't. So when I come back to the outer situation, there's a peace in me, a lack of a forcing current, trying to fix it, right? Remember, the real self is what's in this inner space focused emptiness. The real self already knows. It knows what to say, it knows what not to say, it knows what to do, it knows what not to do, right? It's the human being who's often disconnected from the real self that is going, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do, right? So I'm hoping this is making it more real and less vague. So the steps, all right, I'm willing to go into inner space. Number one. I want to, I'm willing. No matter how hard it is, I'm going to sit here and just keep breathing. And I know it's here, closer by than I think. I'll just give it a few minutes and we already start to connect with it. And then the focused emptiness is just really letting in the distress, just as it is, without trying to defend against it, right? Or explain, I didn't really mean that, or it's just like, I'm really upset. I'm upset with myself. I did it again, or whatever it is, right? And just the willingness to be with that focused emptiness in the inner space, right? Now, the longing for wholeness is coming in. I'm willing to really look at this. I'm willing to understand, how am I creating this over and over again? What's going on in me? How do I create conflict? It doesn't mean the other person doesn't have their own stuff here, right? We're not trying to take on more than is ours. And there will always be some wisdom waiting here to fill us and grow us, right? So let me say how this is landing in you. I want to, my goal is to give you an understanding that I've gotten, like what this really boils down to. Remember longing. Longing is for something that's mine, that I can already have. I want to be whole. I want to be healing. Right? I want to be able to give and receive love. And to enter the inner space, like opening a door and going into a room and sitting down and knowing whatever comes into this inner space is safe to feel, is necessary to feel. And to know there's no judgment or blame, that any guilt, any shame is out there somewhere. It's not in here. Right? So we have about 5 minutes. I just want to be quiet here and give some space to any way you might be struggling here to really let this in, or want to express a feeling of like, oh, a glimmer of it. And remember, a glimmer is a lot, right? A glimmer of who you really are as a spiritual being in human form. That this inner space focused emptiness is really a way of stepping into that at any moment, right? Right in the grind, as Jim says, right? Like,
I think the meeting of the troubled human, or the aspect of us with you said it earlier, for me, it really struck a chord, the longing to be free, but also to belong,
mhm,
and the longing to, know love, you know, be a part of love, deep love. It seems like the longing for that makes sitting with and being with the aspect of myself that I really have difficulty with. Makes
mhm,
that easier.
mhm,
Um, and so, um, you know, it's like they kind of tumble with each other. There's like an alchemy.
mhm,
I have to feel the pain enough to initiate the longing. It seems it's like that. The longing doesn't come out of the blue.
mhm,
So it's been a really interesting
mhm,
experience here tonight as we've
mhm.
talked about that. And the longing, I think you're absolutely correct, is
Yeah,
key, being in touch with that, or being able to feel it.
yeah. And the longing is in every cell of our being, right? And so what we're considering here is being willing to know it's safe and trustworthy.
In a way, if I had to visualize it, it would look like a sanctuary, like my personal inner sanctuary.
Beautiful.
Um, I'm sanctuary oriented already. I love to sequester myself in my house and, get away from the maddening world.
Mhm,
And this visually feels like another sanctuary
mhm.
of sorts.
Thank you, Frank.
I was sort of following along your example and then felt kind of welled up with when you said ignorant of the other person. I think that was what you were talking about. So that really kind of struck me right there, that yeah, being ignorant
Mhm.
and a blessing to know.
Thank you, Esther. Anyone else before we come in for our landing here?
Gained a lot from tonight. And the sanctuary part at the end just touches my heart, because my mother has passed on. But when she was alive, I was dealing with a lot of stuff, very negative. And she'd say, Karen, go to your inner sanctuary.
Beautiful. Wow.
Beautiful way to leave. That was a gift for me. So thank
Wow.
you.
Yeah. So, what I want to say as we come to a close is, remember, you only need to do this. We only need to do this a few moments at a time. Right? And we're going to go in and out of it. It's like, oh, I got far away from it. I want to come back. Okay. Just a few moments at a time, right? That's the practice. And really invite you to do this until we meet again, as things pop up and you're triggered, right? Just to like, whoa, just pause and breathe and visualize yourself coming into this inner sanctuary. The practical thing is, normally we meet on the second and fourth Monday. Yeah, the fourth Monday is Christmas Day. So we're not going to meet on Christmas Day. And so we're going to meet next week, right? So something different, yet it's a chance to keep it fresh. And please feel free to email me with, any cares, concerns, questions, right? You're really welcome to. So invite us just to close our eyes again, go inside for a moment. Visualize all the things we've been sharing and holding just all around you, floating around, right? Lots of pieces, many questions. And we call on the angel of loose ends, a very special angel that can hold 1,000 loose ends and knows where each one of them goes. And take a moment right now and just surrendering all those cares and concerns and questions to the angel of loose ends. And coming back to the faces on the screen, and just in your own way, spoken or not, just a blessing of appreciation for these fellow travelers here, kindred spirits. You're beautiful, and I love you.
Thank you, Brian.
All right.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody,
Thanks.
for
Thanks,
your
Brian.
co-creation and collaboration.
Wonderfully said. Thanks very much, Brian,
Good night,
and everyone.
Thank you.
Good
Everybody.
night.
Night.
Thank you, Jim.